My name is Ralph Ben Murgy, and I host a podcast called Not That Kind of Rabbi. Basically, what I'm doing is looking for the spirit in people, what animates them to do what they do, and the kinds of stories they can tell. You know, people believe they don't have a story. Oh, no, I don't really have much of a story. And then when you talk to them or ask them questions, you'll find out everybody has a story and that they're all wonderful. I think it's a really good idea for us not to become parochial, not to just think of ourselves, the Jewish people this, the Jewish people that. So many people of different faiths and different inclinations have so much to offer to us as Jews, but also to the world in general. So I tend to look for the spark in people more than I look for the affiliation in them. To support our work at the CJN, go to thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you'll even get a tax receipt.
That's some of what it sounded like in Israel on Sunday as newly freed hostage Romi Gonen embraced her family upon her arrival at a hospital in Tel Aviv just a short time after Hamas took her and two other young Israeli women hostages out of captivity where they'd been held for 471 days and handed them over to the Red Cross, who then brought the trio by car through the Gaza border to waiting Israeli special forces. The Red Cross said the three women were reported to be in good condition, although we know that at least two of them were shot and wounded on October 7th, including Romi Gonen at the Nova Music Festival. Unlike Romi, however, the other women, Emily Damari and Doron Steinbrecher, were kidnapped from Kibbutz Kfar Aza, located just a few kilometers east of the Gaza border, when 70 Hamas terrorists swarmed the kibbutz, murdered 64 civilians, 22 IDF soldiers, and captured 19 people, including the family of Toronto's Aharon Brodutch, his sister-in-law Hagar Brodutch, and her three children, Oriya and Yuval, the two boys, and 10-year-old Ofri, who had spent the summer in Ontario attending a Jewish sleepaway camp, Camp Gesher. Avichai Brodutch, the brother, was wounded and left behind in the kibbutz. And from those very first hours, Aharon Brodutch became one of the main public faces of the hostage families here in Canada, tirelessly attending protests, lobbying politicians, and speaking to the media, which he continues to do now, even though his family was released over a year ago, after 51 days in the hands of Hamas, which is why Brodutch worries about the women as they've been prisoners for 60 weeks longer. And Brodutch knows that while the initial joy the families and supporters around the world are surely feeling now, they should prepare for the emotional roller coaster that comes next.
Everyone wants, a lot of people want to visit. It's very hard to say no. My hope is that they really get kind of left alone and allowed to recover on their own.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Monday, January 20th, 2025. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Aharon Brodutch couldn't bring himself to watch the live cable network television coverage of Sunday's hostage handover, but he's one of the few Canadians who can understand what it's been like for the families of those being released now and the agonizing waiting for the next rounds over the coming 5 weeks. Even after more than a year has passed since his sister-in-law and his niece and nephews made a similar journey after being held in a dark room inside a Palestinian home and starved to safety in Israel, the family is still not okay, and the kids are not fully recovered or back full-time at school. And what stings him the most is that this latest deal is the same one that was offered last summer. And Aharon Brodutch is deeply angry that between then and now, more hostages have died and more IDF soldiers have died in the fighting. Aharon Brodutch joins me now from Toronto.
Yeah, good. Going through something positive today. That's nice.
But I wanted to just ask you, we last spoke to you in November 27th, to be exact, 2023, when you were in Israel at the hospital with your brother and reuniting with your sister-in-law and the three kids. What goes through your mind when you're seeing this play out now for the three women?
I mean, everyone is very happy on the, right now, but it's taken too long. It's it's going to be so tough beyond like the first couple of days when everyone's euphoric, I guess, but it's going to be tough, and we're going to find out that many people are dead. I mean, it's just heartbreak. The whole situation is heartbreaking.
You mentioned the euphoria, and you're right. We see that everyone in Israel is jumping up and down and lining the streets outside the hospital at the Sheba Medical Center. When your sister-in-law and the three kids were released, can you tell us what it was like, the actual process? Was it similar to what you saw, where they have the ambulances and they're in pink outfits and bright colors and clean clothes?
Hagar specifically did not want to change her clothes. She wanted to, kind of meet everyone with the way she was. But I think the welcome, I'm sure, is going to be incredible. They did an amazing job, welcoming them at Schneider. So they're getting everything they need. But everyone is anxious. Well, everyone was, I guess. Now they've seen them, but you don't know what you're getting at the other end. We just had no idea what we're going to see. Things don't go as smoothly as you expect them to go, and that like nothing, but every minute that passes is it's tough, right? Just hanging on and waiting is hard, and then you see them again, right? For all of us, it was just good to see them alive and well, and they look, we've seen the videos now, and everyone looks functioning, right?
They look
Yeah,
thin.
but they're alive, mostly intact. Emily lost fingers, able, I mean, from facial expressions, it looks like they're, mentally there. So that's good. But I'm sure it's, for the family, it's heartbreaking seeing your kids in this stage, right? It's not, they don't look like they did a year ago. So it's tough. I mean, for us, there was joy, but there was also, they were super thin. It's not something that's easy to see.
The Red Cross says they're in good condition. Then it comes out later what they actually went through. And I know Hagar spoke in detail about what she and the kids went through. It wasn't such good condition. She said they were starving and other things. We actually interviewed them. We had the privilege of interviewing them when they were in Toronto in the summer, when your brother brought them here for a respite. But I'm wondering, from somebody who's been through that, you mentioned that, it wasn't smooth, the process. Hamas didn't release the names the time they said they were supposed to. Are you surprised about that? And what does that do to families when this game playing happens? Although they blamed it on Israel this time, saying Israel was bombarding, so they couldn't.
The big stress for us was getting the names, because every day they would release, the names of the people. Next day, you're waiting for the phone call. You get the phone call and it's a no. And then, every day was kind of like a repeat of that. It was not a fun process. But that being said, we were very optimistic, and I think, those little glitches didn't affect us too much. And these guys are monsters, right? It's not, you're expecting everything to go smoothly and everyone, to do exactly what they're supposed to do.
When you see that they're surrounded by Qassam Brigade fighters of Hamas, right, in uniform, heavily armed, and the whole streets out there, how intimidating is that? Because we were told that this wasn't going to happen this time, that there was a whole different procedure, there was going to be no cameras, it was going to be quiet, and yet here they are running this gauntlet of fighters, fully armed Hamas fighters. So I'm wondering how that sat with you when you saw that.
That never looks good, right? You never want to see anyone that and you love being surrounded by terrorists. And you don't know who's going to go nuts at the last minute and what's going to happen. And, speaking to Hagar, knowing what it's like on her end, it's the same, right? They don't know if they will get shot like 1 minute before they enter the ambulance. These are not nice people. It is 100% tough. And this maybe it's the first time they get to the point where they, they're close to the ambulance, but this isn't the first time they're told you're going to be released. There is a deal coming up. The captors were also hopeful that a deal will come in multiple times. For Hagar, she could feel it, right? They were when Biden came to visit Israel the first time on October 18th, she could feel everyone like expecting, okay, this is going to end. We are going to release you. And it wasn't. And I'm sure this has happened, over the last 15 months. This has happened multiple times. I mean, psychologically, it has to be extremely hard.
You knew that Hagar and the kids had eventually, they told you later that they weren't held in the tunnels.
Yep.
But we don't know where these women were, these three single girls. What are you expecting to hear? And when do they start telling this stuff as a hostage that now is released? What is sort of your experience in the timeline, when they're ready to talk and who they tell and all that?
My hope is that they don't get exposed to the public for a while. Hagar, when she was interviewed a couple of days ago, she said explicitly, like, the hardest thing is people out of their goodness of their heart. It's not bad people, but people come to visit, you're overwhelmed. All you want is like to be with your family alone. Just leave me alone. So I hope they get left alone and kind of, allowed to sit, especially while the process is going on. There's nothing, there's nothing that's going to be very helpful as, more hostages get released. Kind of, I'm trying to hope that we will actually not learn anything new for a little bit, at least not from them, and that they will be left to recover. My hope is that we'll see everyone back.
When your family was in the Schneider hospital, it's a different hospital. They're not in the same place. What happens there when the first few days or weeks? Can you tell us what the hostages go through?
The first thing that they did was just medical checks, so it was like a couple of days of just going with the doctors and psychologists and everything, just making sure that everything's okay. They got everything they needed, right? I mean, there was nothing they could ask for and get a no to. They weren't there for too long. I don't remember exactly how many days, but at some point you also want to be home. You want to be alone with your family. As soon as they were released home, they still had all the doctors come home to them and everything, really everything that they need. And they're extremely grateful.
I remember seeing them bringing the dog in. So we thought that was an amazing thing for the kids to see.
The dog Rodney was a special request that they made, and even like bringing a dog to a hospital is very unusual, right? It's not but they made the exception. He's a huge dog, so
He's a Ridgeback. He's big.
Yeah, he's big.
Are they still? Is he still alive? He's doing okay. The dog is all right.
Yeah, he's doing okay. Yeah, he also needs to adjust. It's
You mentioned earlier that you said it's very euphoric now as a family who's going through this, but then it's going to get tough. Can you tell us more about what that looks like?
No one is well, right? Everyone is mentally in a terrible state. With my brother's family, the kids don't sleep in their own rooms. It's hard for them to go to school. It's hard for Hagar to be away from the kids. It is very tough, right? They went through something horrible. On top of that, there is a sense that they were abandoned. There is this knowledge, for Hagar, that the Israeli Air Force threw bombs at her. A house collapsed on her due to the Israeli Air Force bombing. This, you can't shake that off.
Right. Others, our listeners, this is in Gaza, and they had to be moved in white sheets in an ambulance so that people wouldn't know they were the hostages, just to pick up the story in case people aren't familiar, right?
Yeah. And I just cannot imagine someone, thinking that for 15 months, this same deal was on the table. The deal was inevitable. So I don't think that sense will ever go away for them. Yeah, that's tough. And then no one's life is normal anymore, right? For my brother, and in many ways for me, this is like the defining moment of our lives. It's not what you want to be the defining moment of your life, but unfortunately it is.
Is he able to work now? Is Hagar able to work, or are they being supported?
So Avichai is working. He's actually working at Schneider as a nurse. And Hagar is not working now, but she'll probably get back. I mean, she's recovering, she's functioning, but I mean, this will never leave them, right? It's not.
Was he a nurse before? He wasn't a nurse before, was he?
He was studying to be a nurse, so he
Oh,
was.
so
He was
he's got his
halfway
full-time
through.
job. They were kidnapped from Kfar Aza, where two of the women who were released also were from. And of course, a lot of people wondering where they are now because the kibbutz is not livable now.
They're still in Shfaim, which is in the center of Israel. They were kind of moving around a little bit around that area. My brother and Hagar, they cannot thank people enough for like having them there and taking care of everything. And of course, they came to visit Toronto and had an amazing time. And I think for my brother especially, seeing the Jewish community both here and in the US was just incredible. Like seeing how much support they had, and hopefully the people who are released now will also get to experience that. It's big, it's helpful.
Right, because they're in captivity. They're told no one cares about you. Everybody's dead.
Yeah, it's like the government didn't care about them. They were left. They were abandoned for 15 months. This is the reality that they're going to experience. No one cared.
I recently wrote a story about the editorial landscape of campus newspapers, how many student newspapers throughout the country are rejecting pro-Israel perspectives. It also focuses on what students are doing about it. This was an important story that I think highlights the cultural war that's taking place on campuses right now as students continue to adopt an anti-Israel and, in some cases, anti-Jewish perspective. My career as a journalist actually started at a student newspaper years ago, so this was a full circle moment that's allowed me to revisit my roots and see how much has changed in a post-October 7th world. My name is Mitchell Konski. I cover campus life and education for the Canadian Jewish News. If you want to support this work and everything else that we do at the CJN, please visit thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you can also get a tax receipt.
We're talking about the deal, so how does it sit with you? The terms, besides you mentioned earlier as well, it took so long, but also the fact that 90 some terrorists are being let out, whereas the same thing kind of happened for you as hostages for terrorists, for you and your family. How does that feel for a family when they know this?
I think the terms of the deal were clear on October 8th, 2023. We knew that there were hundreds of civilians. We knew that Israel has to pay the price for releasing them. That price has not changed. 450 soldiers were sent to die while we all knew that this is the price we're going to pay. Nothing changed. We just paid an extra 450 lives and 15 months of these hostages' lives, and more than 450 because many of the hostages were killed. The Israeli military screwed up and wasn't able to protect the Israeli citizens, and there is a price to pay, and that's the price. I mean,
are you and your family at all doing anything, continuing to work on behalf of these families that are still waiting or hostages
100%.
that are about to come? I know you said when yours came out that your job isn't finished.
I'm doing the little bit that I can in Toronto, which is going to a few demonstrations and doing interviews. I think that's not a lot, but my father has been protesting every day for the past 15 months. He's over 70 years old. He goes every day. He's in the protests. He's speaking. I mean, this is his life, like 100%. This is all we talk about. Avichai and Hagar are trying their best as well to make people listen. This is very much their life as well, on top of trying to get their family recovered. And it weighs on them, the fact that the hostages were not released and still haven't all been released. They know what they went through for 52 days. And Hagar said the way she feels is she couldn't have lasted another day. And these guys were there for more than a year longer. Ofri wakes up every morning asking, is there a deal? She's 11 years old. And this is the thing she asks every morning. Like, it's really, everyone's been doing as much as they can to help and make sure that this deal is, happens. But, we say at the end of the day, it was really pressure from the United States that created this deal. I'm glad, and hopefully this has to get to the finish point where there are no hostages in Gaza.
And then what happens? Because I know the Prime Minister of Israel on Saturday night in his speech, maybe you heard it, said this is a temporary ceasefire, and if anything changes, we're going back in. He hinted or said clearly that President Trump promised him it would be okay, he'd be behind him, and so did Biden, that if Israel had to go back in and do more work on Hamas, they would be okay to do that. Is that what your family and you want?
The world is behind Israel protecting its citizens, but it cannot be at the cost of, it's not an either or option here, right? The hostages get released and then Israel works to protect its citizens. And I'm not an expert on army tactics, but the Israeli military should be able to handle it. And I'm very much hoping that the US forces some sort of peace or quiet or something. I hope the bloodshed stops. I don't know how or if that's possible, but I'm hoping that, this continues to stage 2 and everyone there should be a conclusion to the story. And that conclusion should be whatever deal they're hashing out now should be complete with the hostages being released as soon as possible. I think that's what the American government wants, which is good. And I'm hoping that they force. Unfortunately, it's not what the Israeli government wants, but hopefully the Americans just force the Israeli government to make good choices.
Well, now the Ben-Gvir has resigned from cabinet. That might be a good
thing. And I think this is for Israel. It's not just the government, right? It's the opposition. And this is the point where the opposition steps in and says, we will do everything to have these people come home safely. With everything that happened, it's very hard to trust anyone there, but I'm hoping that it does. That is what they do.
You said you weren't watching it on TV. You were just monitoring whatever on your phone or whatever. What is there a reason you didn't want to be glued to the TV? Is this hard for you to watch?
It's not a football game. It's not. This is people's lives. I feel like we're peeping into people's lives. I don't think it's necessary. I was looking at the newspaper kind of online, following that this is happening. They're going through the next stage. They're in Israeli hands. But at the end, this is a family that's going through something. I don't want to be looking at them. I don't know.
Okay. Listen, Aharon, I'm so grateful that you spent the time with me. It can't be easy to rip the wound off, rip the scab off again and go there.
Really, the wound doesn't start healing until everyone is home. That's when, for me, I'll put this behind me in a sense that I don't want to be interviewed. I don't want to talk to anyone. It's done. But now there is definitely a sense of duty here. I will do whatever I can to help, make this happen. Right.
It's good to see you again and good luck and only good news.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me your time. Meanwhile, Romi Gonen's cousin, Toronto resident Maureen Leshem, spoke to reporters on Sunday.
Romi Gonen has finally been freed from Hamas captivity.
Her cousin is a waitress originally from Kfar Aza. It's a village in northern Israel near the Lebanese border.
We know that the Romi who is returning to us is not the same vibrant, joyful young lady who was stolen from us on October 7th. We will need to get to know a new version of Romi, and that breaks up art. She has been subjected to incomprehensible cruelty and trauma, but we are ready for what lies ahead. Today, we begin the hard work of helping Romi heal and rediscover herself.
Leshem has started a fundraising campaign to help the Gonen family. The website is called Hope for Romi. Their total goal is $136,000. If you want to learn more or to donate, we put the link in our show notes. And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. The executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. Thanks for listening, and check the website of the CJN for more coverage.
My name is Michael Freeman. I am the director of the Canadian Jewish News Podcast Network. When we first started podcasting at the Canadian Jewish News, we had to use the boardroom, and there was this wall of huge hardcover tomes filled with back issues of the CJN print edition, the old weekly paper dating back to the 60s and 70s. And because our microphone setup was not what you would call professional, my co-host and I had to prop up our microphones on these giant books, these tomes. We were literally recording on top of history. Today, the CJN Podcast Network has around a dozen shows. We're at 2 million downloads all time. Like everything we produce at the CJN, our podcasts are totally free. There's no paywall. You can listen to everything for free forever. But we do rely on the community to keep us going. And you can help. Please visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a tax-deductible donation.